Once upon a time, two friends joined forces to bring you the best in horror entertainment. Brian from the north, Tim from the south, each bringing their own unique perspective to the horror community. Movie reviews, Blu-ray releases, beer pairings, games, and more. Welcome to your new home for horror. This is Civil Gore.
So we recently checked out the new thriller Night Drive, in which a rideshare driver experiences a night he won't soon forget. With us tonight to discuss the film are writer and co-director Meghan Leon, co-director Brad Baruh, and stars AJ Bowen and Sophie Dalah. So welcome to the show, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey guys, so I watched the show. Watched the movie today, and I absolutely loved it. Really, really, really great film. So, what I wanted to do to start us off is have everybody kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of some of your background for our listeners. So we start off with my top right, Meghan.
Sure. I don't know how in depth you, how far back.
As in depth as you want to go.
I have always loved movies. I grew up, my parents were a little bit strict with the kind of movies that I could watch. So I watched a lot of like classic movies, Anti-Mame and Singing in the Rain and stuff like that. And the movie that really hooked me was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That was the movie that made me want to make movies. And I've always loved comedies and kind of dark comedies. Like now as an adult, I love the Coen Brothers and Spike Jones and that kind of stuff. And growing up, my dad was in advertising, and I was able to go on a lot of commercial shoots with him, and I kind of caught the production bug. And I ended up, going to film school, coming out to LA, and I just needed a job. I got into editing. I started out doing Judge Joe Brown promos, and I kind of worked my way up, and that was how I ended up meeting Brad. Not with Judge Joe Brown, but the first we worked on together was behind the scenes stuff for the Crazies remake with Timothy Olyphant.
Awesome. What about you, Brad?
I moved to LA in 2000 and I worked at E! News, if you remember that show, and started doing producing on a show called Behind the Scenes, which was like kind of the original behind the scenes documentary show on E! Way back when. And we would get the EPKs and stuff. So I got very interested into where that stuff was coming from, was able to do some of my own shooting on sets. And then I broke off and started doing EPK for Marvel at the time. So that's, we're still doing that. And obviously, as Meghan mentioned, she was a collaborator on that stuff. And yeah, the rest is history. I was able to meet some really cool people like Don Coscarelli, who kind of became a mentor and I've collaborated with. I produced his movie, John Dies at the End. And that's actually how I met AJ, and the rest is history for us.
Awesome. What about you, Sophie?
Well, I'm from Sydney. I moved to LA like 7 years ago, and I met everyone on the last film we made together, Dead Night. And yeah, I'm just like doing my thing out in LA. I love watching movies. Yeah.
Great. And AJ, a bunch of our listeners already know who you are, but tell us a little bit about some of your stuff.
Well, my apologies. I was born at a young age, and I grew up in Georgia, military brat from Georgia, and much like Meghan, I wasn't really allowed to watch. There was a lot of type of things that I wasn't allowed to watch. I grew up in a pretty religious household, which pretty much ensured that the only thing I wanted to watch was like horror movies. And so I would sneak those. And I remember, I've spoken about this before, but like at a very early age, I thought I wanted to be an astronaut before I knew what all you had to do to be one. And I got the chicken pox in second grade. So I was at home watching the Challenger, and I watched it not go very well and was like, I don't want to be an astronaut anymore. And later on that year, we used to go to the movies a lot. We'd walk to a movie theater down from our apartment just north of Atlanta, and they were playing this movie Space Camp. And I saw Space Camp and saw these kids going to Space Camp, which I desperately wanted to do. And then I saw them like going into space and floating around in spacesuits. And for me, I already loved movies, but that was sort of at like 8, 9 years old. That was the first time that my brain sort of made the connection that there were people that pretended to do this stuff, and it was slightly less dangerous than the other things that they were pretending to do. And also at almost exactly the same time, I went to a Cub Scout camp at a place called Camp Dana Morgan in Georgia. It's like an hour southwest of Athens, where I actually ended up going to college. And I went to camp there for scouts. But what I didn't know when we got there was that like a week before they had wrapped shooting a movie there. And so there were still set pieces up from it. And that movie was Jason Lives.
Oh, that's
And yeah. And so the counselors for this camp, this like 3-day camp that we went to, at night, they were putting on hockey masks and scaring the shit out of us. And I was like, oh yeah, I definitely need to do this for a living. So I ended up sort of studying it in college after I gave up being a tuba player, and which is for a different podcast, I guess. And I found myself at the University of Georgia, and I found other people that sort of like ended up there that wanted to make movies, but wanted to do a lot of different parts of the movie. We weren't sure what our areas of focus were. So we kind of found them while we were there. And I ended up more times than not being in front of camera. I got back together with those guys after college, after we were all already kind of making movies on our own. And we made like a little no budget movie in 10 days, sent it to Sundance, and it got in. And now I'm 43 and a dad. And that's what happened.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Yeah, so this question is for Meghan and Brad specifically. So you both collaborated on projects before. I know you kind of touched on it, where you met and everything, but what can you tell us a little bit about how you got started on working on projects together?
It goes back to the Crazies. I remember Meghan coming in as a young editor, and we had done behind the scenes on the Crazies, and it was there were some challenges of creating some of the stuff. We had shot some makeup stuff with actually one of the makeup people that ended up working on Night Drive and Dead Night. Eric Korn, who's an amazing guy. And Meghan, I think you turned some pieces in an extraordinary fashion, and it was just really fast. And I think that was kind of our first thing. Did you freelance? I can't remember exactly how you came in, but yeah, you turned those pieces, and it was just. And I think if you guys watch the home entertainment release, the Blu-ray Crazies, you can see the pieces I'm talking about.
They're probably terrible now.
What?
I said they're probably terrible now, but that was like.
They were great back then, but I bet you they're still good. But Meghan, is that correct? I think that's, and then I was like really good editor, and we ended up collaborating on everything, I think, from that point on, correct? Which led to the movie stuff. So I'll let you take it.
Yeah, movie stuff, and we have 2 shows that we do on Disney Plus as well.
Yeah, I saw that. That was actually really exciting to see that. You guys did like the Mandalorian stuff and the Marvel assembling the universe. Yeah, Tim and I are big Star Wars and Marvel fans, so we're like, whoa, this is pretty cool, actually. We'll get to talk
about we're super lucky to get to work on those properties, and we have the Disney Gallery show, which is behind the scenes Mandalorian specific show, and it's really cool, and it's we're amazingly lucky to get to work with that team for sure. But then also that affords us to be able to go out and do passion projects like Night Drive and work with Sophie and AJ specifically, and do stuff that's awesome, you know what I mean, in a whole nother realm. It's Night Drive specifically was really kind of a labor of love, and we really did kind of shoot it on nights and weekends. I mean, it really was us getting together in between the day jobs and going out and making something. So it was that kind of independent spirit that's so awesome. And I'll let Meghan talk about it, and AJ as a partner, as you guys mentioned the movie and how much you enjoyed it, but a lot of that is AJ's amazing work and being the de facto kind of audience, and his a lot of the reactions are what tell this story, and it's fascinating to watch Sophie go down a weird road and AJ kind of steer the narrative based on reactions that just felt so real to us. So it's a thrill to get to do these movies, but obviously our day job is equally as thrilling in a different way.
So let's talk about Night Drive a little bit, because I don't want to go into any spoilers, because this movie, you definitely don't want to see any spoilers for this. But I did want to ask Meghan how she came up with the idea of this, because it definitely goes in some directions you may not expect.
Sure. Well, Brad and I knew that we wanted to do something feasible with AJ and Sophie. And for a long time, prior to the pandemic, I was taking Lyfts and Ubers. I don't own a car. And so my mind was just kind of thinking that a rideshare story would be a good way to go for a low budget kind of thing. And Brad and I talked about it and sort of started breaking the story down together. And Brad was the one who came up with the weird sort of twist. And at first I was a little skeptical about it, but the more we talked about it, it seemed like it would be kind of a cool, ballsy idea. and we just ran with it. And thankfully, AJ and Sophie were game, and they enjoyed each other's company enough to be trapped in a car together with us in the back seat for a number of weeks and nights. And yeah, it just kind of all coalesced together really nicely.
That's like the perfect segue into my next question. Actually, this is for AJ and Sophie. So, what about this project particular attracted you to it when you saw the script or heard the idea?
First of all, we're getting to work with the people I was working with, for me, and also I just thought like being in anything with AJ is just so much fun. Like just the fact that I got to sit in a car with AJ, I feel like we were laughing the whole time. It was just so much fun. I don't know. What about you, AJ?
I feel like we had two different experiences on the project. I was terrified the whole time. It was dark. It was grim. It's a funny question because I think that, like, if I'm being completely honest, the answer when it's like what attracts you is like when you're like an indie actor is someone says, hey, would you like to be in a movie? And lots of times the answer is going to be yes, but I'm really fortunate that the people that I've gotten to work with are people that I like a lot, and not only that, they're really good at their jobs. And so I heard about, like, we're always talking about, oh, what are we going to do? Basically, like when the mundacity of like regular life and not being on set gets to be too much after about 2 weeks, you're like, okay, let's do something. What are we going to do? And we had a really amazing time. Despite the pressures, we had a really amazing time making Dead Night, and we shot that up in Tahoe. And I was speaking about, Megan and I were talking about this yesterday, is that one of the great things, Megan was an editor on Dead Night, but a rarity in indie film, Megan was there on set. So to have the editor there on set is like having an additional kind of a script supervisor in a way, because you get to, you can sort of, this person understands what the pacing is going to be, where you're kind of going. You can troubleshoot a lot easier. The energy was really great. And also the cast was fairly large based on a lot of the things that just on previous experience for me on Dead Night. The cast was pretty big, and there was a lot of disparate parts of that, and a lot of different types of, when you're an actor, you have a specific, I guess for lack of a better term, like performance type. There's a certain vibe that you bring. And Sophie and I found each other really fast on there. And I'm sure that there's a lot of footage of, like, if we're sitting around a table and there's a lot of actors and some people have things to do, Sophie and I just, without discussing it, we sort of had a shorthand really quickly, and we're kind of engaged in doing stuff and listening to each other and trying to build like this interesting dynamic, which was father-daughter, which is wildly strange because Sophie's a grown person and I didn't realize that I got old. But I did the math, and I guess, like, yeah, it would have been high school, but yeah, I guess I could be Sophie's dad. But we had a really positive, we had a good positive sort of loose organic back and forth there. And Brad and I shared the same brain, and we found that out the first time that we met together to get lunch with Don, and it was almost like we ended up being on our own sort of lunch date. There were other people there, but Brad and I just kept talking about 80s genre movies, like little things like why we both agree of how amazing Halloween 4 is, and the aesthetic of that, and you're just going deep wormholes discussing this sort of stuff with each other. And so Brad told me that, he's like, Megan's going to write a script, and that was the only information that I had. And honestly, that's the only information that I personally need, because I love all these people and they're really good at their jobs. So it would be pretty stupid to not jump at that opportunity when it presents itself, especially when that, like, someone's writing a role for you to perform, who's seen some of your work and who knows you as a person. But what's crazy is, to go back to Brad talking about Megan's turnaround time on some of this editing, is that when Brad told me that that Megan was going to write a script, I think it was like 10 days later I got one. And as far as I knew, there wasn't one beforehand. The only person I've ever worked with that can do that is my buddy Ty West, and what he delivers is pretty much what we end up making. And Meghan delivered this script, and obviously there is a plot twist in it, and I had no idea at the time until I got to that point in the script. But I loved the script, and Meghan and I share the same sort of sensibilities about comedy, and so I just kind of felt like I understood what her intent was. I understood what Brad's intent was, and then basically it was like Sophie and AJ get in the car and give each other shit for a while,
which we're kind of good at.
Yeah, it was pretty easy. I'm not even sure honestly that there is much acting in the movie. It's mostly just us yelling at each other as though we would be. The only difference is that I'm really grateful there was one moment where I did get in a car that Sophie was driving. I'm never doing that again. I mean, I have a daughter. I have things to live for. I can't do that shit.
Yeah, that was a thing.
God, I swear to God, it's not that bad.
It was, I think we were in a camera car next to you guys, right? At that point, and you were definitely.
Actually, I was texting you while she was driving. I was like, we need to wrap this scene out, man. We need to wrap this scene.
It's nerve-wracking driving a car. I mean, I guess I don't know why it is, but it is.
It really is.
Good thing a lot of the stuff.
With the camera following you, it's just like, I don't know. I'm not the best driver at the best of times. So just like the crew, having a crew, like there were like people filming me in the back. I was like, this is just too much.
But we only put your life in danger, AJ, once. I think
there's no acting.
90% of it is rear projection, right? I mean, there was very little.
I just know there was, and to be fair, like it's a pretty high. The only reason that I think that like I was a bit comfortable with doing that sort of stuff is that like I have been doing like micros for like 15 years, and like half of them, for whatever reason, they just decided. I still remember the first time it happened was like with Tom Holland and the old director, not Spider-Man, and we made a short film together, and he didn't tell me until we got there that he was like, all right, you're gonna drive around. I thought he meant like his neighborhood. No, I was driving down Ventura Boulevard on a Saturday night in Studio City with a light blasting inside the car, like in traffic. And it was terrifying. And to have to like be open to camera, that just takes a lot of practice. I ended up doing it in like 10 movies. So by the time we got to this, it was pretty stress-free for me for the most part, because you kind of are driving blind at some points because of the lights. And that was poor Sophie. That was her first experience doing that. And her first experience, most of it, I think was, if I recall, was rear projection, but there was some brief moments where we had to drive down Laurel Canyon. And again, it was like at a time when there were, we're in traffic and there's cars driving, and we don't know, we're not exactly sure where we're going while we're doing some of this stuff, while also trying to act, and just sheer terror. Talk about escape room
sheer
stuff.
terror.
Yeah.
I mean, look, for both of us.
Yeah. Well, that Ventura Boulevard, because I knew that my grandparents lived in Studio City, but so every year would be there a couple times. So I remember, and my mom was not being the best driver, and then with a rent-a-car trying to drive that area. So I can relate to the fear factor of that, of being in a car going down Ventura Boulevard.
Yeah, my next question was actually for Meghan and Brad about that very thing, because I don't think people realize the challenge of shooting car scenes. You have very limited space. In fact, I'd like to hear you guys elaborate a little bit on how that's done when you have a movie that takes place mostly in a vehicle.
There was some discovery there. I mean, I think, thank God, and again, AJ's very good at it. I do remember actually, even before we started production, I think him and I just jumped in a car. And I do remember him saying, oh no, I've done this. And it was, he's an absolute pro at that. So he turns it on, acts, he can do it. And oh, the camera's pointing here, the camera's on, and kind of whatever it is. And he turned here and he gets it and can actually do it on the fly. Super helpful. Technically, we knew we couldn't do that because it's really hard to rig a car, especially on our budget level. So we did some tests, and again, thank God for their availability. I think in my garage, and anybody jump in if I'm telling this wrong. But I think we did some early tests where I at night would go around and I'd mount a DSLR. I think it was a Panasonic GH5S, if you guys want to get technical, where I was actually shooting plates mounted to the picture car and some side stuff and all of that alone. And then I came back and we used a projector. And it was like an Epson power light. It was something that you would get at like a higher end one, but something available at Best Buy, to do rear projection in my garage. And AJ, Megan, Sophie, everybody came, and we set up a cinema camera on a slider. And we started testing that to see if we could actually pull it off. And the tests were instantly like acceptable. Like the luminance levels on the projector, the plates, everything worked in that garage. And then we added some spinning practicals for the interactive lighting. And guys, and AJ, Megan, you guys probably remember this well, but I feel like those tests were highly successful.
Well, what I remember is, sorry, go ahead, Megan.
No, just some of the problems that we had were pretty minimal. Just with the plate, if the camera had bumped a little bit and you can kind of see it in the background, but in general, that stuff instantly worked really, really well.
Yeah, I feel like if I recall, and like Sophie, tell me if I'm wrong, like I think that the idea was that we thought when we were testing that we were potentially shooting like a soft start, like shooting part of the movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And part of it was that we found that like, I think that I feel like if I recall, it was 11 years ago, but if I recall, I feel like we shot an entire scene of the movie, which is funny because we both ended up looking very different by the time we shot it. It was purely intended to be like a experimentation. And I think that it was at the time that we got together to sort of like do a read. But it ended up working well enough that we thought that I think if necessary that, you know, like we could use it.
I think you're right. And I think it was totally usable, I think. And then we had to take a big break, right? And then so we had to basically get us in that stuff.
Yeah. Everybody got older. We all got older, and then it was like,
we all really got older.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. I love hearing the technical stuff behind that.
Well,
yeah. So anyway, we ended up, it ended up working. So we ended up doing that in a combination of some real driving when we could and getting creative on, mounting cameras on. We had a great team.
It's interesting. Like when with movies, you're trying to control as many variables as you can, which is why, productions shoot on sound stages so that they can control the environment. And so a lot of times visually, when we're watching movies where there's stuff in cars, you're usually seeing people either getting into it or getting out of it because you're visually dead the second you get inside a car. And all of us are very visually minded with the types of stuff that we watch and with the types of stuff that we want to make. And we always have been. Like I remember, I know we're here to talk about Night Drive, but I remember a blizzard hit while we were shooting Dead Night, and it kind of boned what we were looking to do, like a ton of snow. And that's free movie right there. We were up in Tahoe, and so Drew, our camera guy, and Brad were outside talking about it, and I came out and we discussed it sort of almost like a nickel package, like a football play, like looking at a piece of paper, like, okay, there's a tree there, there's a tree here, because otherwise it was just going to be a boring, dad goes off into the woods. But we had all of this beautiful stuff. And so we figured out how to time it, how to hit certain spots. So in that movie, there was completely untouched huge drifts of snow. And that's always the ambition with whatever we're doing, is to try to find sort of like the visual value out of something. So when you immediately put yourself probably, I don't know, with this one, I don't know if we're in the car for 50% of the movie. Whenever you're in it, it feels like that's the whole, like it can feel like the whole movie is in it. But I know that we were in other locations. I've seen the movie. I was there. I remember being on the side of a mountain trying to shoot in wind, which is its own separate thing. But like trying to figure out how to make technical filmmaking work by putting yourself inside of a controlled car, which means we can't blow out a side of the car to move the camera around. That gets tricky, but it's sort of algorithmic, and it's a really cool math problem to try to creatively figure out. And Brad and I had a lot of conversations about this when Megan and Brad were cutting it together, and we were all looking at it, seeing what's up. It's pretty seamless. It's even being there, having shot it, you can't tell if you're watching the movie which of our stuff for the most part's rear projection, which of it's practical us on the street shooting. Because it's probably a solid, I don't know the ratio again. I don't know how much of it was. I know that we had 2 days technically on a soundstage. And then we shot some stuff at Brad's, and a lot of it was practical, but you can't tell when you're watching the movie which of the stuff Meghan and Brad worked into that in post, as like sort of like a poor man's process, and which of it was us practically out there on the streets.
Yeah, I definitely didn't notice any difference. Like it seemed so seamless. It seemed so well. It was shot so well that you always felt like you were kind of in the car with you the entire time anyway. So there was definitely nothing that like distracting from that point. So whatever you guys did really worked.
Thanks.
Fantastic. Yeah, good group and good crew. And AJ being a producer and an actor, definitely that in the blocking, a lot of that stuff is dictated by available. So Meghan and I would be there, and you can think and you can have a shot list and you can kind of picture in your head how it's going to work out. But a lot of those shots were, stolen. I mean, we were out in the world, so we have to kind of, and we were lucky to have a red Gemini. And I think at the time it was probably one of the only dual sensor. So it has a dual sensor, so you can shoot in very low light. I think that the sensor was developed by Red for NASA, then they made it available. So we were able to shoot with that, which opened up the world to us. But a lot of the blocking, and Meghan, I'll throw this to you and AJ as well, is dictated by us finding the shots because of the restricted lighting package we had or the available power. And we just kind of had that.
Oh, no. Spoiler alert. Now you're going to make Tim work. He's going to have to edit that. No.
Sorry, Tim.
Sorry,
Meghan.
Tim, you get an associate producer credit in the movie.
Yeah, see, Tim's editing skills are now going to pay off. He's gonna
big X. We're looking at you, Tim. But anyway, I was just saying that, technically working on this movie is super rewarding because we were able to figure that stuff out. But there's definitely an organic, and I hate to use that word, but kind of a very live feel to the way we made this movie, and it was very rewarding when we were able to cross those hurdles, right, Meghan? I mean, your eyes. If I was on camera, your eyes were on the monitor, so that stuff, it's like, and it can get tense, and we can figure it out. AJ's input is always invaluable because he's kind of the master of blocking, especially from an acting perspective. But Meghan, I think finding that stuff was really rewarding the next day, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that was cool was how the camera rig that you were building to mount on the car kept evolving and evolving. We would do stuff, and then it'd be like, oh, I need to get this bungee, and then it'd be like, oh, I need to get this magnet, and it just kept growing and growing and growing, and it was just like this kind of monster of a thing on a thing on a thing to hold it together. And finally, at the end, it worked perfectly, but it definitely was like a big trial and error to try to get it just right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I can guarantee that there's no other production that's ever had the rig that we used because it was invented on the movie.
Yeah, exactly, literally piece by piece together. Like you said, like it'd be like, we need some springs because we need to, dampen this thing. It's shaking too much, and then we get 2 plates of exactly. It was a Frankenstein of a thing. I don't even know if we could rebuild it.
Well, you have to name it now. You name it the Night Drive. That's
it's the Night Drive. Yeah. Nobody would buy it. It's very
be so many arguments about font and like what's the aesthetic design of it. Just so many fights. I remember one of the what's great is when you go into something prepared. What I love about one of the things that I love about movies more than some other types of visual storytelling, like theater, is that we get to be, like in theater, you're trying to hit exactly what's going on. And a big part of it is the energy of the audience. But in film, it's always organic and hasn't been done. And so you go in prepared with a blueprint, and if everybody's on their game, the things that could come up and pose potential problems can end up changing the visual aesthetic and the momentum of little individual beats and moments. And I remember we shot part of the movie out in the desert, like I don't know how familiar you guys are with the Los Angeles area, but northeast of LA is like the Angeles forest, and you get out into like Palmdale, and out there towards Palmdale, we shot some stuff, shot a lot of stuff actually. And I remember we were shooting at this weird ranch on the side of a hill for a character's burial scene. And it was very difficult because it wasn't paved to get out where we needed it to get. And it was very difficult to get cars out into that to be able to gear up. And then if there's more when you're shooting a movie, when the winds are stronger than 15 miles an hour, they'll knock lights over and it ruins sound. And I remember we were having issues one night and we decided to jump down and shoot a little bit of practical actually driving on the road, like out in the desert, with just the four of us. And that happened sometimes while we were shooting, but lots of times there's other people, around, because, we've got Asia who's working on camera, we've got sound people working on things. But this was one time that's like Meghan and Brad and AJ and Sophie in the car. And we hadn't planned to do it, I don't think. If my memory serves, we knew we were at some point in time going to have to crack off a big section of dialogue. But we just were out there. Meghan and Brad were watching playback of some of the stuff that we were doing. And then we kind of had this discussion and Sophie and I were like, fuck it, let's go for it. And we ended up cracking off a big sequence out there on the road. And what's interesting when you're doing practical driving is that, obviously, like we're talking about trying to control the environment, you can't control outside the car once you're driving. And that means that every time a car comes up over the hill out of nowhere, when you're in a pitch black location, it can absolutely bone what you're doing. And you can be 80% of the way through like a 7-page dialogue scene, and then it's poo-pooed because all of a sudden it's blasted out and you can't possibly cut. Meghan can't cut with that because now it's a completely different looking movie. So if there's anything else we want to do, we just kind of can't use any of it. So being able to figure out the energy of between me and Sophie of like, we'll be driving, we're talking to each other, and then all of a sudden a car comes in, and having the ability for us to both just kind of chill and wait for that to pass, but still be in the moment, was really helpful because we were able to get a lot more footage that way. I remember on this one, if I recall, that there was this one sequence that we were talking about that was going to be a big kind of pain in the ass because it was a lot of time that we had to be inside the car and we weren't sure how we were going to crack it off. And then we just up and did it like that night. And I think it was like a 45-minute window, which would have normally taken like a full night of shooting. But we just kind of got lucky. There weren't a ton of people on the road. The vibe was right. And we just kind of like rattled it off. And Sophie and I have worked together before. So there's an ability for us to sort of jump back and forth. And there's times that we trade dialogue with each other without discussing it beforehand, and we just kind of will banter in and out of that while trying to stay in the lane of Meghan's, of what the script is, what we're supposed to be talking about, what we're supposed to be doing. And then that gives us more options.
Yeah, I feel like you like saw our questions ahead of time because that leads so perfectly into our next question. Because what I was going to say was that I think one of the strong, I mean, it's so obvious, but one of the strongest elements of this film is the incredible chemistry that you two have. I mean, it makes it so you don't even care what's going on in the movie. I could just watch like another like hour of the movie of you two going back and forth. Because
oh my god, that's so sweet.
Seriously, like the banter was hilarious. Some of the stuff in there, I don't know if you guys, I guess you kind of hinted at there might have been some ad-libbing in there or something, but whatever it is, it was just, I mean, there were scenes, I found myself like cracking up at some of the like I think like in the middle of this whole tense sequence, and then I think Sophie, your line is like, "What's a herald angel?" Like it just these little lines that come out of and then you'll see like AJ's reaction to it. It's just it was so good in the movie. So what, like, I mean, you kind of told us a little bit, I guess, because you guys worked together before. But what kind of like how much was like ad lib? How much was actually following a set script in that?
We followed a bunch, but I feel like it came from, for me, it was really cool. It's really fun to work with AJ because you'll just constantly be, I'm genuinely surprised by what comes at me when we work together. Like, like just his tonality, like there's just so much humor in what he says. And it just makes so much sense when we're doing it. It's hard to say. I just feel like it's like playing tennis with us. Like, it's like he's just throwing me things and I'm like, oh, I didn't see it that way. Like I don't know. What do you reckon?
There's an energy that you find, and that when you find it, you work together again, because that energy happens between performers, and it's easy to tell because you can say like, oh, like Sophie and AJ have chemistry, because that's like a tangible thing that you can look at. But another huge part of that, inclusively in that, is also that same chemistry between like me and Brad and Sophie and Brad and me and Megan and Brad and like all of us. We all have that exact same energy together. And that's, I think, what I meant by like feeling like being able to decode what Megan's writing, what her intent is, seeing what Brad's talking about and knowing exactly, just understanding, oh, this is what Brad's going for with where the camera is. You know what I mean?
What AJ's saying is true. And I think Megan, because we're not the type of directors that'll give line reads, especially when you have actors like this. So it's interesting to kind of go over it and watch it. But I can tell you guys, first of all, that their chemistry and that back and forth, Sophie's straight deviance and AJ's reaction to that was instant. I don't even think that there was a mistake. I think it was wrong. All those jokes that you're talking about, I think, were mostly on the page and mostly from that first version of the script. I think there was very little. So that stuff that did feel very organic was Megan's words, genius, and these two just going at it. And that was instant. I can tell you guys as a cameraman filming specifically that stuff at the bar, when we got to that bar and those two sat down and those words started coming out of their mouths, I got so taken by what they were doing. And Megan, I guess you did too, because we were sitting at the monitor and we didn't even notice that there's a moving shot with some out of focus foreground and glasses and bar stuff. And we actually ended up shooting the entire scene on the moving camera, which is a huge no-no, because it's like how long is that dialogue scene? It's super long.
It was you asterisk, I'm not trying to sidebar here, but you asterisk as an actor moments where you're like, this is going to be a big, like that was one of the big ones where you're like, oh, this is going to be a problem later on.
Yeah, and
like,
I got lost in it, and watching you guys, and that's because it was so on point that we had to go back, and it's like, oh, it's 10 minutes of dialogue, and the camera just does not stop moving. It was crazy distracting. So we actually had to go back and reshoot that bar stuff with the lockdown camera. So there's a big gap of time in between those. But to your point, their chemistry was so good, and that's them, and that's Megan's words, that I actually ruined the scene. I was so taken by what they were doing.
You guys just gonna have to make constant movies together. That's it. Because I think
let's go, AJ.
I think that we need to do.
Let's go.
I think the four of us need to do like a multiverse kind of a thing. We're ready to go see the alternate version, the what if. Let's make it happen. We're seeking investors now, so you guys cough it up. We'll do it.
Well, I mean, since our podcast basically hemorrhages money, but we'll work on it. We'll get a Patreon going and then put that.
Yeah, I'm totally down for that.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. So are you guys okay on time? We only have a couple more questions. Okay. So the next question was, obviously we've already discussed how you guys look like you're having a blast on set. So I always like to ask filmmakers and the cast if they have any funny or interesting stories that happened while they were filming. This question is pretty much for anybody.
Oh, so many to varying degrees. I think Megan, well, I'll let you take it.
Well, we did have 2 flat tires, which is definitely a problem when most of your movie takes place in a car. One was at the ranch that AJ talked about up in Palmdale. And that was really tricky because since the picture car was a Porsche, they didn't have any dealerships or stores there that had the correct tire. So we had to get AAA out there and then have the car towed back to Los Angeles. I don't even remember if we shot anything that night.
We didn't, because it was and there was nothing to do with pickups, and then it was windy.
Yeah.
And I mean, we had like one generator. It was a disaster. So we didn't have a backup car, which most movies would have for obvious reasons. Did the car choice all the way to just the budget of the film. But it blew the whole night, and that was stressful.
And then the second time we got
sorry, I'm laughing because I know what she's gonna say.
Or was it on Hollywood Boulevard? We were driving to get some of the like city scenes and AJ driving kind of during the day. And we ended up getting the flat and we had to pull over. We're waiting for AAA again. And AJ was taking a stroll and he saw the like Justin Bieber church doing baptisms in a swimming pool or something like that, I think, with like a bunch of food trucks out there. And it was just like super surreal.
It was wild, like growing up in the South and like having to go to like church retreats when I was a kid. I didn't expect to see anything like that in Los Angeles. And I was like, it was like a Saturday afternoon. and the height of when like tourists were going to be. We had just passed like the main strip there at Mann's Chinese Theater and El Capitan, and we'd gotten west of it, and we got a flat like right there, and we knew it was going to be a while. So yeah, I was just sort of wandering and came across a couple of inflatable pools with like hundreds of incredibly affluent, beautiful people, young people, all getting dunked in a line. And the strangest thing to me was not that. The strangest thing to me was that there were high-end food trucks. So like people could go get, like a vegan taco and then get baptized and then go get another vegan taco. And it was just this, I'm surprised we didn't try to crack off any footage of it.
Well, those go hand in hand now, right? Like food trucks and baptisms now, right? I guess.
Is it inappropriate to tell the story about when you guys thought I was being eaten by a coyote?
Oh no, there's nothing. As long as it's not about the spoilers. Oh, you're talking about when Dad Brain kicked in. Yeah. Sorry. Still sorry about that.
That was really funny. I went to go use the bathroom, which was the field, and I saw I think Luke or someone walk towards, I can't remember who exactly it was, but someone was walking towards me, and I was like, "Oh no, don't come here!" And I yelled like, "Don't come here!" And they were like, "What?" And they obviously looked at me, being like, "What?" And I was like, "Do not come here!" and yelled it. And then next thing I know, the whole entire crew is running in my direction, and I'm just sitting on the floor trying to pee.
AJ heard the scream because I was over there, and he went Braveheart. I mean, I think he was trying to kill a bear. He straight up went charging, and everybody just kind of felt like they had to follow. I was like, God damn it, put down the camera, and I'm kind of meandering behind him. But yeah, you imagine, I mean, it was Lord of the Rings, and I think he wanted to kill it. I mean, it was, he sprung, because you could it was very echoey, so you kind of heard a scream. It didn't, you know what I mean? And he flew into action like nobody's business.
I said, Dad, again, it's like I have a 7-year-old daughter, and I heard, and Sophie's played my daughter in a movie, and we heard screaming. Because again, this is the place that I was describing. We're out in the desert, but we're on the side of a mountain, and there's a ton of wind, and we can't really hear, and you definitely can't see because it's pitch black out there. And I hear what sounds like somebody, and then I figure out that it's Sophie, and then I don't hear "Don't come here." What I hear is screaming, and I think that someone's being eaten or attacked, because we knew that we weren't really concerned about the coyotes up there, but we were concerned about mountain lions. And so there's all kinds of stuff like that up there. And I mean, we saw stuff while we were shooting, across this canyon. We saw animals coming down out of the hills and then going back up while we were shooting. And so I heard Sophie screaming, and I just started, I don't know, I didn't have a chance to think about it. I heard a voice screaming, and so I started hauling ass. I was just going to start trying to kill whatever it was.
I really thought who my real friends are.
And she just turned around and looked and didn't know why there were all of these middle-aged people running as fast as they could straight at her, on a mission.
It was honestly quite endearing. I won't lie. It was quite endearing, the whole thing.
Also, there were huge dogs that the owners of that property owned, and they were just they were dire wolves. They were not huge, and they ended up being sweethearts. But it made me very uneasy because we'd be doing a shot, and you would see these horse dogs kind of start coming through the shot towards you, and they were
they would just walk into the shot.
So, do you remember those?
But I feel like they would just walk into the shot, and then we'd be like, "Oh, you weren't you wouldn't want to encourage it because they just want to sit and they want you to pat them, but you'd be in the middle of a scene."
That's right. They carried quite a kind of they had a presence to them.
Wow, they were incredible.
That's no joke though with the coyotes, because I remember as a kid, when I used to visit my grandmother, she had a little poodle, and I guess one point she had this where her property was, it was this big mountainous area right past her backyard, and the coyotes would come down there, and I guess one day she came down because she heard her dog suddenly stop barking at something, and she went out and the coyote had their dog in his mouth. Thank God the dog was okay. She shot a gun up in the air because they owned a carpet store out there, so they had a gun for protection and for the safe, I guess. And she shot it up in the air, and it scared the coyote away. But at the time. I always remember that story, and I'm like, I said, what weird? I said, to me, coming from like, Long Island, I don't, there's no coyotes, I don't hear those kind of things. So it was
No,
impressive to me.
Those things are definitely yeah. We used to live kind of in Coyoteville, and we had a big dog too. And they would, you're right.
That's where I currently live, like in the foothills of the Angeles Forest. It's technically LA, but it's called Tahunga, and no one's ever heard of it. And we kind of moved up here to sort of like get back out in nature. And man, we really got it. Like I have saved our neighbor's dog, the same story. There were like 4 coyotes actively looking to put this dog in the afterlife. And
you fired a gun in the air.
I did not fire a gun in the air. I did not. I'm not a gun owner, but I ran at it. And the only thing that I found, I realized when I got out to them was that I had my daughter's little red plastic sled that we take up to like Wrightwood. And I was swinging this, like the world's cheapest Captain America shield at these coyotes, like trying to stop them from eating this little tiny puppy. But about Night Drive, yeah. Everything's a funny story on stuff like this. We had there was always funny stuff every night. Like I remember, I don't want to give spoilers away, but there's a character that has really terrible things happen to them. And having to, when you're working with the constraints of practical effects, you can't just do it 1,000 times. And the stress of like trying to nail the landing on some of this stuff. I just remember I realized that I like, unrelated to that kind of stuff, like smashing faces in and chopping things off. I remember realizing that there'd just be little moments like Sophie and I getting into, this is so lame, getting into yoga competitions outside of Brad's house, like which one of us can stand in half moon longer. The night that we had to get into a fist fight.
My God.
And working through those sort of stunts and realizing while we were doing it that like, even though I'm in shape, I was like, wow, I'm middle-aged, because Sophie weighs like maybe 50 pounds. And I was, by the 3rd take, I was like, I feel like we got it, guys. I don't think
Do you guys
Sophie
remember when
needs
my
to choke
pants
me.
split?
Oh, that's
My
right.
pants split?
Yeah.
And Brad had to finally, yeah.
We had to replace the pants. Like the car, we didn't have extra pants.
The thing for me mainly that I remember that's funny about this one is that we had such a small core group of people working on it that we had our own language, and also we all had worked together before. And so occasionally random crew people would come in and they would be used to things not being done the way that we were doing them. And there was always this strange, like, foreign language moment. But what I really noticed that in was when there would be other actors. Like I remember we doing one of my favorite things in the movie was also strangely one of the hardest things to shoot. And it wasn't involving the car at all. It was inside that hardware store. A lot of stuff that people don't realize that don't make movies is that, like we go inside this hardware store. And like I said before, we're trying to have like a visually arresting movie, but you have a long, narrow, like aisle one way. And then there's like 4 other super narrow aisles. There's not a lot of places to put a camera or to be interesting. So when you all are sort of on the same page, that can impact the tone of what we're doing. And it definitely did. Like Brad figuring out like fisheye lens stuff for that sequence. And then the actor that had to come in and basically take our money in this scene, having no idea what's going on in this movie, and seeing how strange Sophie and I are acting towards each other. It was always like, it was almost like we were always kind of getting caught, is what it felt like. We would be doing something. And then I remember there was initially a sequence where there was a montage of a lot of people inside Russell's car, different rides. And it was like a rotating basis of someone would jump in, they'd talk, we'd talk for a while, be like, nice to meet you. They'd get out of the car and they'd leave. And then somebody else would jump in the car and it would be a different drive. And we were doing all of this at Brad's. And it was one of the days that we were rocking that sort of rear projection stuff. And every time every single time one of them would get in, they'd be like, what kind of movie is this? What are you doing? And seeing how different their vibe was than ours, which we don't even notice most of the time. We can just get to the business of complaining to each other, which is pretty much, we all operate like an old married couple when we're making movies. just bitching at each other in a low grade passive aggressive way, and like family. And then another person will come in and suddenly we're like, wait, what? Oh, I guess we need to be a bit more professional. Okay, hi, nice to meet you. You know.
Yeah, that I'm glad you mentioned that hardware scene because and especially when you said it was a narrow, I thought that made it so because that was a very intense scene, because obviously you and Sophie's character knew what was going on. Of course, Sophie's character remained much calmer through it, but and you guys, but like as an audience, there's this extra tension. I think the narrow and I guess the use of the fisheye made it very like closed off, and it seemed really like an intense sequence. I thought that was done so well because
it's hard to move in there with a steady cam rig. But you find these spots, and it's like Brad, we were in there 5 minutes and Brad saw that rat, and then it's like, okay, the rat's going to be in the movie.
Oh, that was funny.
Like
Yeah,
this little
that
rubber rat.
guy existed. Yeah, thank God. Yeah, Megan agreed, and we found the and AJ gave us that great shot. But yeah, all of that stuff, I think to AJ's point, it's fun, but it's challenging. So that was an existing space right there on Ventura and Studio City. It's a little teeny hardware store, and we really had to block that out. And then when we got to the three of them, that triangle coverage that we did definitely had to have some
that was
lenses and some
that was there's just always stuff it's always the stuff you don't think is going to be challenging that ends up being strangely challenging.
So that was
it did work. It was a lot of fun. Everybody did a great job on that scene. It's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, I love that scene.
Yeah, that was great because you got everything that I think that was so great about the movie. It like also like it was that scene was a microcosm for it. It had the great banter. It had the tension, the comedy. It had all of it. I thought so. It was really well done. So of course, I guess to wrap things up, we always want to give you guys a chance to kind of course, do a final promotion of the film. So if you want to just everyone can go around, let listeners know where they can find it. And if you want to do a short pitch, kind of why they should check it out. Because I imagine this is a hard film to kind of pitch a little bit without giving away the surprise point. So
well, it's also challenging because, we talked about it from the jump, like even amongst ourselves, we didn't all necessarily, is it a comedy? Is it a thriller? Is it a horror film? It has elements. And I've said before that like the ambition when you're making a movie, I feel like my mission as a storyteller is you want to create something that can only exist this one time with the people that worked on it. That's not interchangeable. It becomes iconic that way. And that means that it stands on its own, kind of as its own genre of movie. And it's been hell, like with us figuring out, well, how are we supposed to, what do I call this thing? It's a movie flavored movie. If you like it, we're like, I don't know that it's a horror film, but I don't know that it's not. It's not a family film. I know that. It's not a Disney movie.
Yeah, it's hard. Like I don't even know. Like I just once it's released, I'm gonna of course I recommend it to everyone to watch it. But I don't know how I'm going to do that other than saying you just have to see it because it's that good.
Thank you,
sir. Yeah, that's kind of what we hoped for. I think
we all discussed and we thought that that Sophie should really be the one to finish this up and tell people why they should go see it.
Everyone just gotta go see this movie. It's unlike anything you've ever seen, and it's just a good old time.
Yeah.
I can tell you can see it. Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV, Google Play, Fandango Now, Microsoft Movies and TV, PlayStation Store, Sling TV, Vimeo On Demand, Vudu, and it's going to be on AT&T, Dish, DirecTV, and Vubiquity, whatever that is. And in some select theaters. I think there's one in Ohio and Kansas, maybe.
It's just
and it's August 2nd, right? Correct?
August 6th.
Oh, 6. I'm sorry, 6. Okay. Oh, that's right. August 2nd is when this comes out, and that's when you could discuss it.
Without my spoiler that Tim's going to edit out, I hope.
Yeah.
And if none of those
Tim's
I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it.
Makes everyone sound good. But thank you guys so much for coming on. This was great. We both absolutely love this film, and we're probably going to be I mean, if you haven't been able to tell, I got a big New York mouth, so I will be telling everybody that will listen that they need to see this. So Tim's a lot more calmer about it, but he'll pass it on too.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.